Well, it's day 14. I'm just at Hontanus. When you come to plan your next where you're going to stay in the hostel, all the hostels in the guidebook are represented by round circles, but not all hostels are the same, even though they've all got the same red circle.
The guidebook says there are lots of different types, but I think there are just 3 basic ones. Big albergues, maybe they have 80 beds or more. They're in large towns, they're run by non-profit making organisations, and then when you check in, the person you meet behind the desk will be an employee. So they'll check your passport, stamp your credential, take your money, and that will be about it. They all have kitchens. They're large enough to have maybe 2 or 3 washing machines. They have large communal areas, and they're quite cheap to stay in, maybe only 5 or 6 euros. They're clean, basic, and quite a safe choice. And they're very popular with young people, and so in the evenings it can be quite vibrant. Generally, big albergues don't provide an evening meal. You're expected to either go into the town or to cook in the kitchen, although at Roncesvalles they did sell tickets for a meal in a nearby restaurant. The second type of albergue, I think, are the smaller ones. They could be privately owned or could be owned by a non-profit making organisation. They cost about 7 to 10 euros to stay. I think about 2/3 of them have kitchens and about 1/3 have washing machines. But the people you meet there could be the albergue owner, or could be volunteers, but they just seem more welcoming and more helpful than in the big albergues. When it comes to whether an albergue has a kitchen or not, I think the rule is, if they provide you an evening meal, then there is no kitchen, or at least no kitchen that the pilgrims can use. If they don't provide an evening meal, then that will mean there are bars and restaurants nearby which will serve the pilgrims menu and be good value for money. Also, if they don't provide an evening meal, the chances are they'll have a kitchen. The third type of albergue is another type of small albergue, and those are the donativos. They're run by volunteers who are super enthusiastic. They want your stay at the albergue to be a very good one. They want your Camino to be a success. They stay up with you in the evening. They get up the next morning with you. When you check into a donativo, there'll be a box on the table, and you just put in however much money you feel like, depending on how rich you're feeling or how good you think the albergue is. Or, if you're a bit hard up, you're entitled to put your hand into the box and take some money out. You see these signs that say, pay what you can and take what you need. I think the volunteers are religious, but they don't bash you over the head with religion. Each donativo has its own unique character. Whenever I was looking at albergues in a particular village, if I saw one was a donativo, then that's the one I stayed at. I think that staying in a donativo is the best way to have a real Camino experience and not just stay in a cheap, cramped hotel. Lots of albergues have bunk beds. Lots of the bunk beds do not have safety rails. They're quite narrow, so if you move awkwardly or lose your balance, it'd be quite easy to fall off. Also, you must not put your bag on the bed because it's unhygienic and can spread bed bugs. So you'll be in the top bunk, your bag will be on the floor, there'll be lots of going up and down the hard metal ladder.
Okay.
If you're young, which on the Camino can be less than 50, you're really expected to go on the top bunk, especially if you're a man, so get ready. Snoring in albergues is a real problem. You must take earplugs. All pilgrims have stories about nights where maybe the whole dormitory couldn't sleep because one person was snoring really loudly. A bad night's sleep because of snoring is much more tiring than a hard day of walking. If you want to escape the snoring and have some personal space, staying in a casa rural is a good thing to do. €35 for a room with 2 single beds. It's much quieter. They have their own bathrooms. Whenever I was walking with someone, we just automatically checked into a casa rural without ever discussing shall we go in a casa rural or a dormitory. It's a real luxury, and for one night a week it makes a big difference. If I was to do the Camino again, I think I would read the guidebook a bit more carefully, maybe do a bit of googling and find 5 or 6 albergues that are different to the others, are a bit special and are worth making a visit to. This is especially true if you have special dietary requirements. In albergues, it's quite common for there to be no soap or paper in the toilets, so be prepared. So, sometime during the afternoon you arrive at your chosen albergue, you check in, you get your credentials stamped, and with a bit of practice you can have washed yourself and your clothes within about 30 minutes. Well, this gives you the rest of the day to relax or possibly cook your evening meal. Before I did the Camino, I wondered what people did in the afternoons, but now I know you rest and you rest. The options for the evening meal depend more on where the albergue is and less on what type of albergue it is. For example, in a small village where there are no shops or bars, or at least no bars that serve food, they will provide a communal meal. In one albergue where there was no communal meal, no shops, no restaurants nearby, they had pizza menus, and you phoned up the local pizza restaurant and they drove the pizzas out to you. In small villages, it can be easier to eat sometimes than it is in big towns. In a small village, the Camino and the pilgrims will really dominate it. The bars, restaurants and shops are all geared to serve the pilgrims. Even on a Sunday, small shops will still open. And in, for example, Los Arcos, the restaurants and the bars in the main square serve the pilgrims menu all day, every day, and you could eat whenever you wanted to. In a big town, the pilgrims will be less important, and so the bars and restaurants will be geared more towards serving local Spanish people. Well, local Spanish people tend to eat late in the evenings, and so they don't start serving food until about 8. Well, if the albergue locks its doors at 10, it doesn't give you that long to eat in a restaurant. Also, in big towns, quite often we found the shops are closed on a Sunday. Eating the communal meal at the albergue, it's easy, you meet other people, it's the traditional pilgrim experience. But not everyone speaks the same language, the conversations can be a bit difficult sometimes. The food groups you get in a pilgrim's menu can be quite random. No matter how hard I tried, I always seem to miss out on carbohydrate or greens or even protein sometimes. Here's a main dish, it's just a chicken leg. Although they normally have the most important one, the ice cream food group. When you get to the albergue, ask about the evening meal, because quite often you have to tell them you want it before a certain time. And the time that the evening meal is served is the time you must be there. It's not like a restaurant where you just roll up whenever you like to. And if you don't turn up on time, you will still get fed, but you will get really told off. The kitchens can get quite busy. For example, a 90-bed albergue might have one cooker, and the cooker might just have 3 rings, so you have to be patient.
Casa de cada uno. Esta cocina es la casa para 90 personas, ¿vale?
If you get fed up with the pilgrim's menu, a good meal in a bar might cost about €8, and you can get a decent 3-course meal in a restaurant for between about €15 and €20. If there are certain foods that you can't eat and you think it will be easier to cook, then you can get an idea about the sorts of foods you'll be able to buy, at least in the big supermarkets, by having a look at the DIA supermarket page. I saw lots of DIA, D-I-A, supermarkets along the Camino. They have a website, and on their website it's possible to search for foods with English words. For example, if you put in the word bread, it will come back with all the products that have the word pan in. Pan is a Spanish word for bread. And also has a checkbox for sin gluten, for without gluten. So that's an easy way to prepare. Normally, with a bit of flexibility, vegans can eat something on the pilgrim's menu, but you need to tell the owners, otherwise you might be in for a bit of a surprise.